White Noise by Don DeLillo. Coronavirus reminds me of the chapter, The Airborne Toxic Event. So I'll probably just read it. So let me just read it all. So after a night of dreamlit snows, the air turned clear and still. There was a taut blue quality in the January light, a hardness and confidence. The sound of boots on packed snow. The contrails streaked cleanly in the high sky. Weather was very much the point, although I didn't know it at first. I turned into our street and walked past men bent over shovels in their driveways, breathing vapor. A squirrel moved along a limb in a flowing motion, a passage so continuous it seemed to be its own physical law, different from the ones we've learned to trust. When I was halfway down the street, I saw Heinrich crouched on a small ledge outside our attic window. He wore his camouflage jacket and cap, an outfit with complex meaning for him. At 14, struggling to grow and to escape notice simultaneously, his secrets known to us all. He looked east through binoculars. I went back to the kitchen. In the entranceway, the washer and dryer were vibrating nicely. I could tell from Babette's voice that the person she was talking to on the phone was her father. In impatience mixed with guilt and apprehension, I stood behind her, put my cold hands on her cheeks, a little thing I liked to do. She hung up the phone. Why is he on the roof? Heinrich? Something about the train yards, she said. It was on the radio. Shouldn't I get him down? Why? He could fall. Don't tell him that. Why not? He thinks you underestimate him. He's on a ledge, I said. There must be something I should be doing. The more you show concern, the closer he'll go to the edge. I know that, but I have to get him down. Coax him back in, she said. Be sensitive and caring. Get him to talk about himself. Don't make sudden movements. When I got to the attic, he was already back inside, standing by the open window, still looking through the glasses. Abandoned possessions were everywhere, oppressive and soul-worrying, creating a weather of their own among the exposed beams and posts, the fiberglass insulation pads. What happened? The radio said a tank car derailed, but I don't think it derailed from what I could see. I think it got rammed and something punched a hole in it. There's a lot of smoke, and I don't like the looks of it. What does it look like? He handed me the binoculars and stepped aside. Without climbing onto the ledge, I couldn't see the switching yard and the car or cars in question, but the smoke was plainly visible, a heavy black mass hanging in the air above the river, more or less shapeless. Where did you see fire? Did you see fire engines? They're all over the place, he said, but it looks to me like they're not getting too close. It must be pretty toxic or pretty explosive stuff, or both. It won't come this way. How do you know? It just won't. The point is you shouldn't be standing on icy ledges. It worries Baba. You think if you tell me it worries her, I'll feel guilty and not do it, but if you tell me it worries you, I'll do it all the time. Shut the window, I told him. We went back to the kitchen. Steffi was looking through the brightly colored mail of coupons, lotteries, and contests. This was the last day of the holiday break for the grade school and high school. Classes on the hill will resume in a week. I sent Heinrich outside to clear snow from the walk. I watched him stand out there, utterly still, his head turned slightly, a honed awareness in his stance. It took me a while to realize he was listening to the sirens beyond the river. An hour later, he was back in the attic, this time with a radio and highway map. I climbed the narrow stairs, borrowed the glasses, and looked again. It was still there, a slightly larger accumulation, a towering mass, in fact, maybe a little blacker now. The radio calls it a feathery plume, he said, but it's not a plume. What is it? Like a shapeless, growing thing, a dark black breathing thing of smoke. Why do they call it a plume? Airtime is valuable. They can't go into long, tortured descriptions. Have they said what kind of chemical is it? It's called Niodine Derivative, or Niodine D. It was in a movie we saw in school on toxic waste. These videotaped rats. What did it cause? The movie wasn't sure what it do to humans. Mainly, it was rats growing urgent lumps. What's the movie said? So that's what the movie said. What does the radio say? At first they said skin irritation and sweaty palms, but now they say nausea, vomiting, shortness of breath. This is human nausea we're talking about, not rats. No rats, he said. I gave him the binoculars. Well, it won't come this way. How do you know, he said. I just know. It's perfectly calm and still today, and there's a wind at this time of year. It blows that away, not this way. What if it blows this way? It won't. Just this one time? It won't. Why should it? He paused a beat and said in a flat tone, they just closed part of the interstate. They would want to do that, of course. Why? They just would. A sensible precaution. A way to facilitate movement of service vehicles and such. Any number of reasons that have nothing to do with wind or wind direction. Babette had, Babette's head appeared at the top of the stairway. She said a neighbor had told her the spill from the tank car was 35,000 gallons. People were being told to stay out of the area. A feathery plume hung over the site. She also said the girls were complaining of sweating palms. There's been a correction, Heinrich told her. Tell them they ought to be throwing up. A helicopter flew over, headed in the direction of the accident. The voice on the radio said, available for a limited time, only with optional megabyte hard disk. Babette's head sank out of sight. I watched Heinrich tape the road map to 2 posts. When I went down to the kitchen to pay some bills, aware of colored spots whirling Then I went down to the kitchen to pay some bills, aware of colored spots whirling atomically somewhere to the right and behind me. Steffi said, can you see the feathery plume from the attic window? It's not a plume. But will we have to leave our homes? Of course not. How do you know? I just know. Remember how we couldn't go to school? That was inside. That was inside. This is outside. We heard police sirens blowing. I watched Stephanie's lips form the sequence. Wow, 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 wow. She smiled in a certain way when she saw me watching, as though gently started out of some absent-minded pleasure. Denise, this is their other daughter, Denise walked in, rubbing her hands on her jeans. Sounds very Roseanne, doesn't it, Denise? They're using snow blowers to blow stuff onto the spill, she said. What kind of stuff? I don't know what it's supposed to make the spill harmless, which doesn't explain what they're doing about the actual plume. They're keeping it from getting bigger, I said. When do we eat? I don't know, but if it gets any bigger, it'll get here with or without wind. It won't get here, I said. How do you know? Because it won't. She looked at her palms and went upstairs. The phone rang. Babette walked into the kitchen and picked it up. She looked at me as she listened. I wrote 2 checks, periodically glancing up to see if she was still looking at me. She seemed to study my face for hidden meaning of the message she was receiving. I puckered my lips in a way I knew she disliked. That was the Stovers, she said. They spoke directly with the weather center outside Glassboro. They're calling it a feathery. They're not calling it a feathery plume anymore. What are they calling it? A black billowing cloud. That's a little more accurate, which means they're coming to grips with the thing. Good. There's more, she said. It's expected that some sort of air mass may be moving down from Canada. There's always an air mass moving down from Canada. That's true, she said. There's certainly nothing new in that. And since Canada is to the north, if the billowing cloud is blown due south, it will miss us by a comfortable margin. When do we eat? I said. We heard sirens again, a different set this time, a larger sound, not police, fire, ambulance. They were air raid sirens, I realized. and they seemed to be blowing in Sawyersville, a small community to the northeast. Steffi washed her hands at the kitchen sink and went upstairs. Babette started taking things out of the refrigerator. I grabbed her by the side of the thigh as she passed the table. She squirmed deliciously, a package of frozen corn in her hand. Maybe we ought to be more concerned about the billowing cloud, she said. It's because of the kids we keep saying nothing's going to happen. We don't want to scare them. Nothing is going to happen. I know nothing's going to happen. You know nothing's going to happen. But at some level, we ought to think about it anyway, just in case. These things happen to poor people who live in exposed areas. Society is set up in such a way that it's the poor and the uneducated who suffer the main impact of natural and man-made disasters. People in low-lying areas get the floods. People in the shanties get the hurricanes and tornadoes. I'm a college professor. Did you ever see a college professor rowing a boat down his own street in one of those TV floods? We live in a neat and pleasant town near a college with a quaint name. These things don't happen in places like Blacksmith. She was sitting on my lap by now. The checks, bills, contest forms, and coupons were scattered across the table. What do you want to eat? Why do you want dinner so early? She said in a sexy whisper. That wasn't very sexy how I said that, but... So I miss lunch. Shall I do some chili fried chicken? First rate. Where is Walder? She said, thick voice, as I ran my hand over her breast, trying my teeth to undo her bra clip through the blouse. I don't know. Maybe Murray stole him. I ignored your gown. I ironed your gown, she said. Great, great. Did you pay the phone bill? Can't find it. We were both thick-voiced now. Her arms were crossed over my arms in such a way that I could read the serving suggestions on the box of corn niblets in her left hand. Let's think about the billowing cloud just a little bit, okay? It could be dangerous. Everything in tank cars is dangerous, but the effects are mainly long range, and all we have to do is stay out of the way. Let's just be sure to keep in the back of our mind, she said, getting up to smash an ice tray repeatedly on the rim of the sink, dislodging the cubes in groups of 2 and 3. I puckered my lips at her. Then I climbed to the attic one more time. Wilder was up there with Heinrich, whose fast glance in my direction contained a certain practiced accusation. They're not calling it the feathery plume anymore, he said, not meeting my eyes, as if to spare himself the pain of my embarrassment. I already knew that. They're calling it the black billowing cloud. Good. Why is that good? It means they're looking the thing more or less squarely in the eye. They're on top of the situation. With an air of weary decisiveness, I opened the window, took the binoculars, and climbed onto the ledge. I was wearing a heavy sweater and felt comfortable enough in the cold air, but made certain to keep my weight tipped against the building. With my son's, with my son's outstretched hand clutching my belt, I sensed his support for my little mission, even his hopeful conviction that I might be able to add the balanced weight of a mature and considered judgment to his pure observations. This is a parent's task, after all. I put the glasses to my face and peered through the gathering dark. Beneath the cloud of vaporized chemicals, the scene was one of urgency and operated chaos. Floodlights swept across the switching yard. Army helicopters hovered at various points, shining additional lights down on the scene. Colored lights from police cruisers crisscrossed with wider beams. The tank car sat solidly on tracks, fumes rising from what appeared to be a hole in one end. The coupling device from a second car had apparently pierced the tank car. Fire engines were deployed at a distance, ambulances and police vans at a greater distance. I could hear sirens' voices calling through bullhorns, a layer of radio static causing small warps in the frosty air. Men raced from one vehicle to another, unpacked equipment, carried empty stretchers. Other men in bright yellow Milex suits and respirator mask, moved slowly through the luminous haze, carrying death-measuring instruments. Snowblowers sprayed a pink substance toward the tank car and the surrounding landscape. The thick mist arched through the air like some grand confection at a concert of patriotic music. The snowblowers were the types used on airport runways. The police vans were the type to transport riot casualties. Smoke drifted from red beams of light into darkness and then into the breath of scenic white floods. The men in Milex suits moved with a lunar caution. Each step was the exercise of some anxiety not provided for by instinct. Fire and explosion were not the inherent dangers here. This death would penetrate, seep into the genes, show itself in bodies not yet born. They moved as if across a swell of moon dust, bulky and wobbling, trapped in the idea of the nature of time. I crawled back inside with some difficulty. "What do you think?" he said. "It's still hanging there, looks rooted to the spot." "So you're saying you don't think it'll come this way?" "I can't tell by your voice that you know something. I can tell by your voice that you know something I don't know." "Do you think it'll come this way or not?" "You want me to say it won't come this way in a million years, and then you'll attack with your little fistful of data. Come on, tell me what they said on the radio while I was out there. It doesn't cause nausea, vomiting, shortness of breath, like they said before. What does it cause? Heart palpitations and a sense of deja vu." Deja vu? "It affects the false part of the human memory, or whatever. That's not all. They're not calling it the black billowing cloud anymore." "What are they calling it?" He looked at me carefully. "The airborne toxic event." He spoke these words in a clipped and foreboding manner, syllable by syllable, as if he sensed the threat in state-created terminology. He continued to watch me carefully, searching my face for some reassurance against the possibility of real danger, a reassurance he would immediately reject as phony, a favorite ploy of his. "These things are not important. The important thing is location. It's there, we're here. A large mass is moving down from Canada," he said evenly. "I already knew that. That doesn't mean it's not important. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, depends. The weather's about to change." He practically cried out to me in a voice charged with a plaintive throb of his special time of life. "I'm not just a college professor. I'm the head of a department. I don't see myself fleeing an airborne toxic event. That's for people who live in mobile homes out in the scrubby parts of the country where the fish hatcheries are." We watched Wilder climb backwards down the attic steps, which were higher than the steps elsewhere in the house. At dinner, Denise kept getting up and walking in small, stiff, rapid strides to the toilet off the hall. A hand clapped on her mouth. We paused in odd moments of chewing and salt sprinkling to hear her retch incompletely. Heinrich told her she was showing outdated symptoms. She gave him a slit-eyed look. It was a period of looks and glances, teeming interactions, part of the sensory array I ordinarily cherish. Heat, noise, light, looks, words, gestures, personalities, appliances. A colloquial density that makes family life the one medium of sense knowledge in which an astonishment of heart is routinely contained. I watched the girls communicate in hooded looks. "Are we eating a little early tonight?" Denise said. "What do you call early?" her mother said. Denise looked at Steffi. "Is it because we want to get it out of the way?" she said. "Why do we want to get it out of the way?" "In case something happens," Steffi said. "What could happen?" Babette said. The girls looked at each other again. A solemn and lingering exchange that indicated some dark suspicion as being confirmed. Air raid sirens sounded again, this time so close to us that we were negatively affected, shaken to the point of avoiding each other's eyes as a way of denying that something unusual was going on. The sound came from our own red brick firehouse, sirens that hadn't been tested in a decade or more. They made a noise like some territorial squawk from out of the the Mesozoic era. A parrot carnivore with a DC-9 wingspan. What a raucousness of brute aggression filled the house, making it seem as though the walls would fly apart. So close to us, so surely upon us, amazing to think this sonic monster lay hidden nearby for years. We went on eating quietly and neatly, reducing the size of our bites, asking politely for things to be passed. We became meticulous and terse, diminished the scope of our movements, buttered our bread in the manner of technicians restoring a fresco. Still, the horrific squawk went on. We continued to avoid eye contact, were careful not to clink utensils. I believe there passed among us the sheepish hope that only in this way could we avoid being noticed. It was as though the sirens heralded the presence of some controlling mechanism, a thing we would do well to not provoke with our conscientious and spilled food. It wasn't until a second noise became audible in the pulse of the powerful sirens that we thought to effect a pause in our little episode of decorous hysteria. Heinrich ran to the front door and opened it. The night's combined sounds came washing in with a freshness and renewed immediacy. For the first time in minutes, we looked at each other. Knowing the new sound was an amplified voice, but not sure what it was saying, Heinrich returned, walking in an over-deliberate and stylized manner with elements of stealth. This seemed to mean he was frozen with significance. "They want us to evacuate," he said, not meeting our eyes. Babette said, "Did you get the impression they were only making a suggestion, or was it a little more mandatory, do you think?" "It was a fire captain's car with a loudspeaker, and it was going pretty fast," I said. "In other words, you didn't have an opportunity to notice the subtle edges of intonation." The voice was screaming out. Due to sirens, Babette said hopefully. I'm going to take a little drink here. Wet my whistle. Play. Alright, so where are we at? The voice was screaming out. Due to the sirens, Babette said helpfully. It was something like, "Evacuate all places of residence. Cloud of deadly chemicals. Cloud of deadly chemicals." We sat there over sponge cake and canned peaches. "I'm sure there's plenty of time," Babette said. "Or they would have made a point of telling us to hurry. How fast do air masses move, I wonder?" Steffi read a coupon of Baby Lux, crying softly. This brought Denise to life. She went upstairs to pack some things for all of us. Heinrich raced 2 steps at a time to the attic for his binoculars, highway map, and radio. Babette went to the pantry and began gathering us tins and jars with familiar life-enhancing labels. Steffi helped me clear the table. 20 minutes later, we were in the car. The voice on the radio said that people in the west end of town were to head for the abandoned Boy Scout camp where Red Cross volunteers would dispense juice and coffee. People from the east end were to take the parkway to the 4th Service area where they would proceed to a restaurant called Kung Fu Palace, a multi-wing building with pagodas, lily pond, and live deer. We were among the latecomers in the former group and joined the traffic flow into the main route out of town, a sordid gauntlet of used cars, fast food, discount drugs, and quad cinemas. As we awaited our turn to edge onto the 4-lane road, we heard the amplified voice above and behind us calling out to darkened homes in a street of sycamores and tall hedges. "Abandon all domiciles, now, toxic event, chemical cloud." The voice grew louder, faded, grew loud again as the vehicle moved in and out of local streets. toxic event, chemical cloud. When the words became faint, the cadence itself was still discernible, a reoccurring sequence in the distance. It seems that danger assigns to public voices the responsibility of a rhythm, as if in metrical units there is a coherence we can use to balance whatever senseless and furious event it is about to come rushing around our heads. We made it onto the road as snow began to fall. We had little to say to each other, our minds not yet adjusted to the actuality of things, the absurd fact of evacuation. Mainly we looked at people in other cars, trying to work out from their faces how frightened we would be. Traffic moved at a crawl, but we thought the pace would pick up some miles down the road, where there is a break in the barrier divide that would enable our westbound flow to utilize all four lanes. The two opposite lanes were empty, which meant police had already halted traffic coming this way. An encouraging sign. What people in an exodus fear most immediately is that those in positions of authority will long since have fled, leaving us in charge of our own chaos. The snow came down thickly. A traffic moved in fits and starts. There was a lifestyle sale at a at a home furnishing mart. Well-lighted men and women stood by the huge window, looking out at us and wondering. It made us feel like fools, like tourists doing all the wrong things. Why were they content to shop for furniture while we sat panically in slow-poke traffic in a snowstorm? They knew something we didn't. In a crisis, the true facts are whatever other people say they are. No one's knowledge is less secure than your own. Air raid sirens still sounding in 2 or more towns. What could those shoppers know that would make them remain behind while a more or less clear path to safety lay before us all? I started pushing buttons on the radio. On a Glassboro station, we learned there was new and important information. People already indoors were being asked to stay indoors. We were left to guess the meaning of this. Were the roads impossibly jammed? Was it snowing Iodine D? I kept punching buttons, hoping to find something that... 1 minute. Oui. So I kept punching buttons, hoping to find someone with background information. A woman identified as a customer affairs editor began a discussion of the medical problems that could result from personal contact with the airborne toxic elements. Babette and I exchanged a wary glance. She immediately began talking to the girls while I turned the volume down to keep them from learning what they might imagine was in store for them. To be continued.